What is destiny?
She said, how much do we have control over
Over the destiny.
Yeah.
Destiny.
That's a totally different question. So, how much control do we have over our life? In karmic terms, in terms of yoga. In terms of even when we engage with something like the I Ching or the tarot or even numerology or even a properly drawn up astrological chart, we are trying to find certain workable parameters. We are trying to find certain guidance. We are trying to find certain patterns. And those patterns do exist. So, how much do we have control over our life? In the beginning, the answer is very little. Because this is very disheartening in one sense, because none of us really wish to concede how much of our life is not in our control. You know, if you look at your life, so much of it is just accidental. When you are going to be born, gender that you are going to get, which part of the world, which race you belong to, what sort of education. You know, simple things like, did you like the way your parents dressed you as a child, or did you always find that very restrictive? In India, it's a huge cause of childhood trauma. You know, the fights between parents and children. The children want to be in a particular way, or they want to wear particular kind of clothes, and parents refuse. The sort of name that you would get, your name is very important. I'll talk a little bit about the connection of the name to the destiny. But there is an old saying in the Western mystical tradition that as rivers to the ocean, so does the destiny of a person flow from their name. And it's not an Indian saying, it should have been, but it's actually it's actually a Western mystical saying. You know, so the name that you are given becomes very, very important. In where you are sent to school, where your parents are living, what socioeconomic category you are born into, when you start thinking about that, what choice did we have in anything? What choice did we have in any of the breaks we got as human beings? What choice did we have in what we ended up becoming? Some people are lucky, and the vast majority of human beings are extremely unfortunate. Especially if you don't need to look at that in abstract terms. You can just step out of your building in India and you can see, that stark poverty right in your face, and then right beside that you will find a Maybach just go past, or a Rolls Royce. So the notion of life being fundamentally unfair is in a sense true from the evidence. Some people get the break, some people don't get the break. Now, we know Steve Jobs and Apple and all that, but what should have been a traumatic experience is the reason why he became Steve Jobs. If his father and his mother, his actual birth father and mother, had got along, he would have been some kind of Syrian businessman, probably selling dried fruits to India, because his dad was a Syrian, Abdul Fattah Jandali. And he would not have been Steve Jandali, he would have been some other. So what seems to have been a trauma, that the parents abandoned him, gave him up for adoption, that is the reason why we have Apple products today. Though you can see the fact that he was one of the famously difficult persons. I mean, let's be honest, he was a famous asshole. Like it came from this childhood abandonment, because something that all children should have as a right, just to be loved and wanted by their parents. He knew that he did not have it. That he was just so much garbage in his parents' life at that time in their life, for whatever reasons. So the extent to which luck, the extent to which fortunate or unfortunate circumstances determine your character, determine your life, we cannot downplay that. It is quite immature to downplay that. The first time I heard this from a yogi, he said, do you realize that every time you meet somebody, it could be the last time you're meeting them? But we operate on these habitual patterns, we operate on these beliefs for which there is no evidence that things will continue as they will continue. He was like, one brake failure somewhere could shatter a life. Somebody is watering the plant, something happens, and the pot falls from the 12th floor, and you happen to. In Greek mythology, there was a very famous king who a soothsayer had prophesied that you will die by something falling on your head. So he immediately goes and starts living out in the open air, and he thinks he has cheated it. One day an eagle is flying over, it drops a tortoise onto his head. There is an even more terrifying story in the Sufi tradition where Sulaiman, Solomon, he is very big in the Sufi tradition because he is regarded as a great mystic master and things like that. So one of Sulaiman's courtiers come to him and say that, please help me because I saw moth, death, come for me, and he's watching me with these big eyes and I'm scared, and please help me. And Sulaiman said, death comes for everybody, be sensible about it. And he's like, no, you are Sulaiman, you are the greatest master in the world, so help me. And, okay, you take this horse of mine, and he lives in Baghdad. He said, you take this horse of mine and it will take you to India in one night. So he takes the horse and he runs. And after that, Sulaiman is passing out and he sees death waiting, and he says, Acha, what have you come here for? And he's saying, I'm just a little puzzled. Why? Saying, because I saw one of your courtiers here and I'm supposed to take his life tomorrow in India. So, but the point of the matter is, life is strange. Life is unexpected. Life cannot be managed and controlled. If you try to manage and control life, it will come back and bite you very badly in the ass, Life does not like being managed and controlled. It has a certain flow. It has what we know in India as gati. Gati is the process of unfoldment, the flow of unfoldment. So life has a certain gati, and if you try to interfere with the gati, then it wreaks havoc onto you. So even the Taoists know that, because for them, being natural, what they considered being natural was being in harmony with the flow, not to interfere with the. But when we look at this, it's so catastrophically unfair. Some people are born into billionaire families, and some people are born on footpaths or in war zones. So if that is true, then the universe is a very harsh and cruel place. So this dilemma, which is of course the old problem of theodicy, how can you justify the presence of evil and also simultaneously the existence of a good God? This dilemma has been articulated many times over, that if God is all powerful and good, then why does he tolerate evil? Either he can demolish evil and he chooses not to, which means he is evil himself, or he wishes to do something about evil but he is powerless to do so, which means he is not God. So it's an unanswerable argument in that sense. The only real answer, it is an answer which even W. Somerset Maugham said is the only logically satisfying answer, though he was an atheist and a non-believer, so he said, I cannot accept it, but it is the only logical and satisfying answer, is the notion of karma. That for every action there is a consequence. Now yogis, of course, we've been doing yoga in India from the time of the Indus Valley. You have seals where you're seeing these people sit in asana doing yoga, So yogis, of course, they must have come up against this question very early on in life, and they must have asked, why this lucky break to some and toil and suffering to others, and they must have gone very deep into meditation. The the process is called conscious focused attention in other systems. It's called samyama in yoga. But basically, if you have a question, you just bring your entire life energy, your mind, your emotion, your body, your feeling, your internal ki, your prana, everything to bear on that, and the knowledge is vouchsafed to you. The knowledge emerges from that process of samyama. It's a very energy draining process, but it's a wonderful process. And all people who become enlightened have the ability to do samyama. Sometimes it activates before enlightenment, but it is one of the sort of guaranteed givens. You have to have it. The other thing is you have to have the knowledge of all your previous lives. Without that, it is not possible. That is called the Purna Smriti, the full memory, or the Punya Smriti, the sacred memory. Before you become enlightened, that is also a non-negotiable. That's a non-negotiable. So they did samyama on this process. They started wrestling with this because it's a ghastly. Some of them became the niyati people, the ajivikas. Everything is carved in stone. Some people are born lucky, some people are born unlucky. So basically make as much money and have as much sex as you can, till you are cremated. And they were very open about it. They were very, very, very open about it in extremely vulgar, and Sanskrit is an elegant language, but they found a way to be vulgar in it. So that, like I said, the ruling classes were enchanted by such a philosophy, that you can basically do whatever you want and you're not to blame for it. So they naturally gave lot of donations, and they gave money to carve out cave temples, everything. They were an ongoing process till the 12th century, when they were absorbed by the Vaishnavas. But it was a very peculiar strand in Indian culture for a long time. This whole pure and simple hedonism, this whole pure and simple fatalism, and the idea was called niyati. Now, when you look at the circumstances of a life, especially if the life is not good, niyati looks and sounds like a damn good idea. That yes, the universe is an evil place. That I think after the Napoleonic Wars, Goethe had said that I thank God I am not young in such a completely finished time. Because we don't realize we are living in actually pretty glorious times. How quickly a society can crash. People don't realize that. People don't realize that when Columbus went to America, America had a population of 100 million people. There were large cities. Unfortunately, with the advent of colonialism, diseases came in, and they had no immunity. One of the consequences of what happened with the conquistadors and the discovery of the New World was that cities went back into the forest, and a sort of mini ice age actually took place, because so many new trees came up all over the American continent that they withdrew that much carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and temperatures actually fell for the next 30 years. Because large parts of what is today Chicago and stuff like that were highly urbanized, but they were urbanized in a very peculiar way, because they didn't have steel and they didn't have draft animals to pull weights. The buildings used to be made of mud and wood, but they were actual large cities, in what is today the Chicago Great Lakes area, and it all just got wiped out. So for a civilization to collapse, forget an individual life, it really doesn't take that much time. It can happen in 30, 40 years. So this notion of the uncertainty of the world and how we should value every moment we get is very, very significant in yoga. It is very important in yoga. But coming back to what they did, when they started thinking about, is the universe just or unjust, it became very, very important for them to understand that. because we cannot preach good behavior if it is a fundamentally unjust universe. And yogis are the most hard, cold-blooded people I know. They go wherever the truth follows. And if the universe was unjust, they would have said the universe is unjust. So basically, you know, become strong, become powerful, make money, and dominate and bully. So they did this thing, and they discovered. First, they discovered something very important. They discovered Ritha. Ritha is the cosmic law or the cosmic vibration. Ritha is how the universe is constituted or constructed, which is what more or less what the Tao is or the Tao is. It is the same thing. They call it Li. I think in the Chinese thing they call it Li. The rhythm of the universe, the rule of the universe, Ritha. So in the Vedas you never find the word karma, you always find Ritha. And the idea was, which is where the word Reet Rivaj comes in today's, the social norms and the social practices, that word still exists in the language, Reet. So the Ritha was the first thing that they stumbled across, that there is a way that things unfold. And then they discovered this whole action consequence loop. They discovered that an energy being or a life or not, I wouldn't want to call it Atma because it's not really the Atma is out. They discovered that personalities do not reincarnate, our unique personality is a one-time shot. We have what are called Vasana Samskaras. Now I've talked about Vasana Samskaras a lot, but Vasanas are basically, Vasana literally means smell, so it means what do we desire, what do we like to inhale, what do we take in, because ahara does not mean only food, it means all input. It all means all input at an emotional level, it means all input at a psychological and a physical. And so what we watch also becomes ahara. What we read becomes ahara. What we communicate and learn from other people become ahara. And most of the time we are putting garbage into ourselves. So they discovered this whole notion, and by our ahara, by what we put into ourselves, we create vasanas, we create desires, we create tendencies. And then those vasanas deepen into neurological pathways, and those are called samaskaras. They become the ongoing tendencies. And this carries forth lifetime to lifetime. So they discovered that human beings are not a one-time shot, which was basically knowledge that every ancient culture knew. The Judaic mystics even today know it. Christianity I think the Council of Nicaea, something like that, somewhere in the 3rd century, 4th century, that's when they declared it to be a heresy. But even then they also used to know that there is return. They discovered that these Vasana Samaskaras coalesce into karmic packets and they keep reproducing. They keep coming back. They keep coming back because there is an action, there is a consequence. There is an action, there is a consequence. And one lifetime is not enough to work out the karma. So you have to come back and until you keep learning what you need to learn. Now you have hurt somebody, from a Ritha point of view, they have a right to hurt you back. Yeah. The problem is nobody can ever retaliate in exact measure. Whenever you retaliate maybe a little bit more. Now they have a right to hurt you.
It's a cycle.
Which is why they say don't revenge yourself. Not because revenge is a wrong thing. I think revenge is perfect because revenge is actually saying somebody was in a position of power and misused it. Revenge is always about weakness. Revenge is always about somebody being, because nobody does a wrong thing or a bad thing to a person they consider stronger than themselves. It's very clear. Evil is always committed. Evil is always committed when you feel, for whatever reason, even if temporary insanity, at that moment you feel stronger than the person to whom you are doing it. This is very clear. Yoga understood this very early on, that evil is always a misuse of power. Evil is always a false sense of inflation. Evil is always a sense of that I am stronger. There will be no consequence. And they figured that out. The consequence is there. It takes a little time for the consequence to manifest. But evil, it's very simple. You don't need any complex reasons why people do evil. It's just very simple. They feel stronger at that moment. I'm stronger than this person. This person cannot hurt me. Which is why we love revenge narratives. Which is why we love revenge stories. Because deep in our soul we know that is justice. Yeah? Deep in our soul we know that is justice. Which is why that Tarantino's movie, that Inglorious Bastards, where the Jews, basically he rewrites history so that the Jews get to massacre Hitler and all that. And everybody love that movie because at a deep level we know that's justice. So evil, people get into too much hassle about evil, and nobody does something wrong to another person if they are afraid that person can screw my happiness. It's that simple. Now, of course, sometimes people go insane, so they don't realize that there are going to be consequences for this. But at that moment, they are in that inflated sense of self, that inflated sense of power. Which is why power has always been regarded with a lot of caution in the yogic tradition. Because, power leads to this temptation to do evil. So, to come back to the question of what happens in a life, therefore, do we have agency? Her question, Shaila's question is very simple. Do we have agency? Do we have any control over what happens? Or are we just helpless victims of,
Fate.
whatever our fate, good or bad fate, brought our parents together? And they were now, from a yogic perspective, it's very interesting. I didn't know this. Paramahansa Yogananda, I read in one of his books, he explained this. You are not the only child who could have been born at that one particular moment. And that is very, very interesting. What he says is, your Vasana Samskara create a certain vibrational match with those two people who are going to be your parents. But there could be well up to 20, 30 other people who have the similar vibrational match. And they have the Rinanubandhan, the debt bond, they have the karmic connection. So, he says every birth is actually, you fought your way to the top of the queue. That I am going to be born at this particular time. Otherwise, you have to wait. You wait in what is basically a sort of karmic limbo, So, here is your chance to manifest and work out your karma. So, what he says is, no matter how much a person fails later in life, everybody begins with a victory. You elbowed out all those other people and you managed to get born. What he was saying is, to get born is also pretty difficult. Even to find the right, and you see, for enlightened masters it's much more difficult. Osho apparently waited 700 years for his people to come up to a place where he could then again engage with them. So what he said is, my last birth was 700 years back, and I basically had to just wait for them to progress so that I could then tell what. So, and if at that time there was nobody to manifest, that was the problem with what happened to Krishnamurti. They found Krishnamurti. He was going to be a master in his own right, but the time for the Maitreya Buddha to manifest was there. But there were simply no parents with the right kind of vibration to. So what the Theosophists did was, they were hollowing him out so that they could do an avesham. An avesham is like a walk-in, and they could get the Maitreya to walk into him. Now, he was a very powerful person himself, due to Krishnamurti. He didn't appreciate that, which is why he rejected the books that he wrote when he was in Avesham. He has written about 4 or 5 books before. Then when he was 25, he made his famous speech, Truth is a Pathless Land, and he broke with the order of the star, and he said, masters are the biggest con game. So that is the famous speech, Truth is a Pathless Land. And he has accepted only what he has said after that, because till then he was under Avesham, he was under the walking. So there are these multiple complex ways that you might want to take birth because all the circumstances are right, but you don't have two people with the correct Vasana Samskara, two people with the correct Rinanubandhan. So this is an exceedingly complex game. This is an exceedingly complex game. And that is why the yogis never tire of saying one thing: be grateful for your human life. Be grateful for your human life. This is such a blessing, no matter what kind of miserable condition you find yourself in. You have managed to be born as a human. You have managed to become conscious. You have managed to get knowledge. Do the best with what you have been given. They keep telling you that. Because they understand this is, of course, with the 7 billion population, it doesn't look like a big deal now. But I have my doubts how long the planet is going to tolerate that. It's going to give itself a good shake and and bring the levels down to a manageable. I only hope it happens after I am passed. I don't think so. I think I'll live to see it. So, this thing coming back again to agency. Why do people find themselves in the circumstances they find themselves in? They find themselves in those circumstances because of their actions. So that was yoga's greatest insight. If you change your actions, you can change the consequences of your actions. If you change your behavior, then because they are very practical people, they started asking what techniques can be discovered, what techniques can be invented. And that is when Hatha Yoga and Pranayama and the pujas and all those, these are all techniques to change at a very simplest level how you vibrate. Because who you are in life is a certain quality of vibration. The more intensely you vibrate, the more your success in societal terms, or the more your success in spiritual terms. So every sadhana, every procedure in yoga is to change your vibration. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and most of all at the pranic level. Most of all. See, the breath, the prana is not the breath. The breath is the vehicle to bring prana into the body. Or the breath is the thread by which. So pranayama is not actually breath control. Pranayama is actually limitations or restraint on the prana. The breath is the method by which we work. So they discovered these aspects. They found out that if you do certain processes, if you do certain meditations, you do certain sadhanas, you do certain tapasyas, you can actually work through large amounts of karma. Once the karma is there, it has to be either burnt up or it has to be experienced. If the karma is already active, that is the prarabdha karma, the karma already in motion. You cannot do anything much about that. You can deflect it, but you cannot stop it. The karma that is in potential, the sabija karma, the karma that is waiting, that you can burn. And the karma that you are accumulating, that also you can stop. That is when you become what is known as Jivan Mukta, liberated while living. You sort of get enclosed in a bubble of energy and your actions no longer have consequences. That's of course very high level, but it's possible, it's quite possible. It requires also that the person is basically in samadhi, whether waking or sleeping, the person is permanently in samadhi. Most people, samadhi cannot be held in a waking consciousness, it can be held only in a meditative consciousness. But samadhi is possible even in your waking. Which is why the famous definition in the Yoga Vashishta, Yoga Samadhi. So what did that imply when they discovered? Doesn't mean therefore that we are the architects of our fate. Obviously no yogi would think that, because it's very clear that so many extraneous factors Yes, but they discovered that you can find your central channel, you can find the central sutra of your life, the central thread of your life. What is it that is the most important thing for you over lifetimes? And you can enhance that. And then you come to one lifetime where it suddenly seems as if genius has burst forth. No, but it's accumulation over many lifetimes. So the point of yoga they discovered is to find that central thread. What is that central thread, or what is your swadharma? What is your innate dharma? Which the Greeks have translated. They are the only people with the exact equivalent for swadharma, which is enteleki. What is your purpose encoded within? What is the reason why you took birth? There is a reason. Most of the time you are not aware of it. Until you find that sutra, until you find that thread, you won't find your swadharma. So you need to recognize your karmic patterns. You need to recognize this is who I am. These are the things I like, these are the things I dislike, which is why one of the techniques in yoga is always they start going after your sweets first, because the taste for sweet is one of the strongest vasanas. It is one of the strongest desires. So one of the first things they tell you is to give up sweet things. Because if you can break that, you break an enormous amount of karma. You break one of your strongest vasana samskaras. Because you carry your sweet tooth from lifetimes to lifetimes. So they keep identifying. This is vasana samskara, this is becoming a boulder in the karmic evolution of the person. So it is not to torture you and to gain control over you or just to bully you that they tell you these things. Most people think, Arey, I have to give up everything that is worth. No, when they tell you don't sleep around, they know if you sleep around. My famous karmic consequences of sex video, where every time you sleep with one person, your karmic stream and their karmic stream get entangled, which is okay. That is bad enough, but that is still okay. But just like in AIDS, yoga knew it much before the AIDS people knew it. You never sleep with one person, you sleep with all the people that they have slept with. All those karmic streams can come into you. So suddenly you might have some kind of appalling run of bad luck just because you had a relationship with somebody, and it's not even that person's karma, it is a karma from somebody else. So that is the reason why the yogis would say, be responsible about. Now, it's only today now after Jainism and Buddhism that celibacy has become important. But if you look at the time of the Vedas, Upanishads, all the teachers, all the yogis were all married people with children. So celibacy and it is a completely wrong turn that we have taken. And unfortunately, the Victorians were here, and they were just horrified at India, and they have managed now to leave that one enduring legacy. They have managed to leave this fear and horror of sexuality in the Indian mind. It's a really tragic turn to India, but okay, we have to go back. It is the worst thing that they have done. That where the reflexive thing is anything. I get this feedback all the time. You're a yogi, you're a spiritually heightened person. You should not speak about sex. You should not speak about money. And I'm like, only people like me should speak about it. Otherwise, the perverts speak about sex and the corrupt speak about money. Why would you listen to some guy who's gone to jail for insider trading talk about money? Because he obviously has a very twisted relationship with it, But this is one of the deepest problems in the Indian psyche today, that this internalization of Victorian horror of sex,